And I'm Macy.
And we are second year occupational therapy students at Midwestern, and we are about to go on our level 2 fieldwork rotations in January.
So here today we have Dr. Christine Merchant. Dr. Merchant began practicing in 1977, and then she actually helped start the MW Glendale campus program in 1999. So she's been with Midwestern for 25 years. And she's worked in various settings with differing diagnoses, which I'm hoping that she will get to share a little bit more about that with us in this session today. So we're just going to go ahead and get started. We have a bunch of different questions for Dr. Merchant.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Yeah. Dr. Merchant, can you walk us through your OT journey, maybe from getting into OT school to where you are today?
Well, that's a lot of years. So, yeah, my first job was working in psychiatry, and I worked with adolescents who had, conduct disorders and various types of psychiatric disorders, and I loved it. I was there about maybe more like 4 years, and I became the senior therapist in the psychiatric services department. And so I did that for 2 years, and then I became the manager, and that was my first management role, was to manage all the therapists. And we had a lot of therapists at that point working in psychiatry. And then I did a couple of other things we moved to California from Minnesota. I started kind of working again in psychiatric services. And then I became the assistant administrator of a very small, it was a catastrophic care facility, actually. All of the patients were on ventilators. Many of them were completely paralyzed with ALS or head injuries or other things. And so in that role, I actually supervised more than just occupational therapists. I supervised the lab personnel and the respiratory therapy personnel and all of that. And then we moved to Arizona. And in Arizona, I started working with kids and learned that I do not like kids. I'm not a playful person. I only did that job for about a year. And then there was this advertisement for a position in an OT assistant program. And, I had no experience teaching at all. And yet I thought, this is a good time. I've done a lot of different things. Maybe I would like to teach and, expand my footprint by teaching students. And so I applied for the job and was shocked when I got it. So I taught for about a year there. And then circumstances caused me to become the program director at the OT assistant program. And so that's how I kind of got my feet wet in the program director role, learning all about accreditation and all of the other important things that you do when you run a program. And then in, what year was it? 1999, Midwestern decided to open an OT program here in Glendale, Arizona. And they recruited me to become the associate program director. And so that was when we were still accredited with the Downers Grove campus. And so the Downers Grove campus was the home of the actual program director. And I basically was just kind of the one running the show here in Arizona. And then in 2015, we separated from the Downers Grove campus, and I became the official program director. So that's kind of my journey along the way. But, I've also done a lot of other types of service activities and leadership activities. I've been a member of the Arizona OT Association since the year that I moved here. And in not 19. You guys don't have the 19s to get all confused with, but in about 2010, I was actually president of the state association. Wow. So I've had a number of different positions with the state association. So that was a service type of leadership.
Mm-hmm. So going back to the beginning of your OT journey, What was it like for you when you were in OT school and just starting out? Like, what role did leadership and service play during your time in school?
Well, I would say I hadn't yet discovered leadership at that point in time. I was more just, keeping my head above water as a student. But as part of my, development of my interest in OT, I did volunteer work at a number of different places. I worked in a group home for adolescents that had behavior disorders. So that's kind of how I learned how much I enjoyed working with adolescents. I did some volunteer work in a hospital. I did some volunteer work, a preschool, I believe. This is a long time ago now, but it was all in my drive to learn about what occupational therapy was. So once I got into the program, I think I really concentrated more on being a student than continuing the volunteering.
Amazing. Can you talk a little bit about what leadership opportunities that Midwestern has to offer for students as well as the faculty?
Yeah, so there are lots of different opportunities for students, particularly. We have a student council, which basically is the OT program council. And so there are board members, president, vice president, secretary, treasurer, and a variety of other activities, types of roles for students. And so I really encourage students to get involved as an officer of one of those on that particular board. We also have a student occupational therapy association at Midwestern University. And so they have their separate board of directors. And so there's a president, vice president, secretary, treasurer, et cetera there. And so I think that those are opportunities to start developing leadership skills. As the program director, I remember so many of the SOTA presidents and class presidents coming in, and really they were like in tears. They're like, I don't know how to do this. I don't know what I'm doing. But just stepping up and taking that opportunity to develop leadership skills is really important as a student. And so the other opportunities for service for students are things like our home mission project, which is going out to the homeless shelters around the valley. It's an interprofessional team of PTs, DOs. Some of our students go from the dental program, the optometry program. So this interdisciplinary team goes out to the homeless shelters, and then they see the residents that have signed up for services on that particular evening. And it's a great opportunity for OT students to show what occupational therapy is, because you probably know that occupational therapy is we always have to explain what it is. Nobody knows what OT is. And so by being a part of the interdisciplinary team, we're able to show the DOs and the PAs and the PTs, all of those different disciplines, what occupational therapists actually do. Some of the other service opportunities available for students are going to the ACBVI, which is the Arizona Center for Blind and Visually Impaired. And the students serve as sighted guides during the conference that ACBVI holds every year. And there are just all kinds of different things. We do a lot of service as a university, and so students can join any kinds of service opportunities that they want. As far as faculty members, many of our faculty members do participate and kind of lead the service activities. Dr. De La Montagne is the one who's really the home program coordinator, and Susan Tully is the one who does the wellness day for all of the students across campus. She leads the students in preparation for that. And of course, we do have an assistant program director. So that's another leadership role. We have the fieldwork coordinator, which is another leadership role. So there are a lot of opportunities to develop your leadership skills and to give back to the community. I think one of the things that's always driven my leadership since I became a faculty member is the idea that we rely on our community to train our students. You all are ready to go out on your level 2 rotations, and that's a volunteer position that your clinical educators are going to volunteer to take you as students. And so as faculty members, I've always felt it was really an obligation to give back to the community and give back to the profession that I belong to. So.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing some of those opportunities with us. And I was curious, like, were there any specific experiences like that shaped your perspective on this? And if not, like, how do you think that leadership in school can like translate to being an OT practitioner? Like just being part of, the home program or the student council or SOTA, like how does that translate into the career?
Well, I think what it does is it develops your confidence, and you have an opportunity to develop those leadership skills while you're in the leadership position. And as you become more confident, you're more likely to step up for those leadership positions. And a lot of the leadership positions are tied with the service organizations that you join. And so my observation over the years has been that it doesn't take very long in practice before somebody taps you on the shoulder and says, you're ready to be the senior therapist here, or you're ready to be the rehab director here. And so I've seen many of our alumni moving into leadership positions as occupational therapists. And so that's why it's so important to develop your leadership skills while you're in school, so that you're ready when somebody taps you on the shoulder and pushes you into that leadership role.
I love the advice. We were kind of talking about like all the different positions that you've had throughout your professional career. Is there like one specific leadership role that you've had that you found to be like the most rewarding for you?
Oh, I'd absolutely have to say being the program director at Midwestern University. It's been just such a joy to lead such a great faculty, and the community that we've developed at Midwestern University with the faculty and the students. It's just it's warm and caring and collaborative and collegial, and so it's by far been my favorite job of all time. That's why I've been here for 25 years. I never, ever thought I would work anywhere for that long. But, just having the experience of getting to know so many students and the joy of seeing them develop from, knowing very little about occupational therapy to going out and rocking their level 2 rotations and being so successful. So it's just, I'm so proud of all of the alumni that we've graduated from Midwestern. I'm also really excited about the fact that we now have 6 of our alumni. That's more than half of our faculty are our own alumni. So it speaks to our sense of community that our graduates would want to come back and teach at the same program that they went to OT school for.
Yes, it is an amazing school. I love being there, and I know Jen could probably say the same. What do you think sparked your interest in becoming a teacher? Or like, how did you know you were ready for the next step in that, or even just the next path in your career?
Well, even in high school, I came from a family of teachers. All of my aunts, my mom, and my dad ended up as superintendent of schools where I grew up. And so my assumption was that I would be a teacher. And I can remember back to lining up all the chairs in the basement and making my friends sit in there like they were at their desks and I was the teacher. And so my assumption was that I would go into teaching, and my dad then, being the superintendent of schools, knew a bigger picture, and he encouraged me to look at some other types of jobs. And so he set me up to shadow an occupational therapist and in the schools, and I absolutely loved it. It was like, this is just so cool. This is so simple, but it's so important. Makes such a big difference in these students' lives. And so I did more, shadowing of other occupational therapists, and went into practice after I got out of school. But teaching was always in the back of my mind. And so after I'd had all this different experiences, I'd worked with kids, I'd worked with adults, psychiatric patients, traumatic brain injury clients. I finally had kind of came to the decision that I was done with patient care, but now I wanted to teach. Mm-hmm. And so that was the decision. And like I said earlier, I had no experience. And so I was just shocked when I was actually hired as a teacher. And my first cohort that I taught, I started them at the beginning of the OTA program. So I actually was teaching anatomy and some of the real basic science stuff. I remember spending 2 weeks working on my introductory anatomy lecture. And then we taught 4 days of the week. So I taught my introductory lecture on Monday, and then it was like, oh dear, I'm not ready for Tuesday. I don't know what to do. So it was a fire, just jumping into the fire and trying it and see what it was like. And it was very rewarding, and I'm so happy I did it.
Well, as two of your students, we're really glad that you made that decision because you are a wonderful teacher.
Yeah. Oh,
and
thank you.
We were just talking about one of the very first lessons that we had with you. You kind of talked about imposter syndrome and how many students have that when they go into school. And is there a moment in your life that you can recall, whether that was in school or on your rotations, where you felt that, but then it just kind of clicked that you were supposed to be an OT?
Gosh, I think I had imposter syndrome in the beginning of the OT program. That was, that's pretty typical, right? You're looking around the room and thinking, how did I get here with all these other smart students? And I probably had that same feeling pretty much throughout the first year of my education. But then I developed friendships and I got to know people, and I learned that, I was as good as everybody else was, basically. And but the time that it really clicked for me, I think, to be an occupational therapist was kind of a funny story. I was on I think it was my second level 2 rotation, and it was in a rehabilitation center. And I was actually treating a movie star's father. You guys wouldn't remember his name, but back in the day, he was Telly Savalas, was this actor that played a detective on television. And I ended up with his father as my patient. And his father had had a stroke. And I brought him down to the clinic, and I was having him do I think we were doing finger painting. I was trying to get him to use both of his hands together because he was paralyzed on one side. And so I had a lap tray on his wheelchair, and we were doing I think, like I said, I think it was finger painting, because when he decided that he wasn't happy to do this anymore, he took his dentures out with his painted hands and threw them at me.
Oh, no.
And I was so grossed out. I was like, oh my God, what do I do? I have these green dentures with finger paint on them. And so I walked over to the sink and I washed them off, and I came back and I handed it to him. And I thought, well, I'm an OT now.
This is it. This is what I'm going to be doing.
If I can do that, I can do pretty much anything.
Mm-hmm.
I love that.
Oh my gosh, that is too funny. Let's see. In what ways do you think leadership and service contribute to advancing the field as a whole?
I really think that occupational therapy needs people to step into leadership roles. I think it's for the benefit of the profession that people go back and develop their education, number one, so that's one of the reasons that we have maintained a master's degree, is because we hope that our graduates will go back to school and get their advanced doctoral degrees, PhDs or EDDs or whatever, because then they'll have the ability, the knowledge and the leadership and the confidence to be able to really help our profession to grow. And so we need leaders at the national level in AOTA. And one of the other roles that I participated in at the national level was to be Arizona's representative to the Representative Assembly. Mm-hmm. And that was a assembly where there were only 50 people. There was one representative from each state, so I represented Arizona. And we entertained motions about the profession, things that might have the potential to actually change the practice of occupational therapy. And so we would proceed to break into small groups, discuss these various motions and what impact they would have on the practice of occupational therapy. One of the ones that I remember distinctly was that there was a movement to require occupational therapists to go back to take the NBCOT exam if they had been out of practice for more than 5 years. And basically that motion did not pass because people didn't want to have that onerous exam to have to pass again. But that was one of the things that, could have changed our practice. Mm-hmm. Other things that we discussed were whether or not the doctoral degree should be a mandatory degree. And 2 years in a row, the Representative Assembly decided that the master's degree level is an appropriate level and that some students will want the doctorate, but that both levels should continue to exist. And so some of the things that really change our profession are decided at that Representative Assembly. But I also want to put in a word for our state association. That's one of the areas we have some difficulty getting participation. And I should have mentioned earlier when we were talking about service opportunities for students, that one of the ways to develop your leadership skills is to be a student intern for the Arizona Occupational Therapy Association. Mm-hmm. And so essentially you work side by side with one of the Arizona OT Association board members and learn what their role is and help them do their job. And, it's just one more way to watch a leader in action and to develop your own leadership skills. Mm-hmm. So all of the professional associations, AOTA and the Arizona OT Association, those are the things that impact the practice of occupational therapy. And so to be a leader there is to be a person who influences what the profession of OT is going to look like in the future.
I love that. Kind of going back to the leadership a bit and how you've been involved in many different groups and had many different leadership roles, but you've also worked under many leaders. Can you talk about some of the skills or just, let's see, like what makes a great leader? Like what really worked in those groups or what didn't work in those groups?
That's a great question. I have worked for a lot of different administrators. And I think that the best one I ever had was when I was first promoted into the rehab manager position in my first area of employment. And she was a phenomenal leader. She knew that I was new and I didn't know what I was doing. And so she kind of walked alongside me and waited for me to ask her for help, and was always available anytime I needed advice. But she was willing to delegate to me as she saw that I was able to do the job. She left me alone, more or less, to do what I knew how to do. But if I needed her, she was always there and available to help. She was a great cheerleader. She would always, give me praise for things done well. But if I made a mistake, she would say, well, now you won't do that again, right? And so, she never criticized mistakes, but she just basically assured me that I would not make that mistake again. I did have another manager, though, that I ultimately, this was the manager when I made the decision to leave and become a teacher. And it was because of this manager that I decided to leave my job. I was a rehab director at another facility, but I worked under this gentleman who, it was basically a contract agency. So I was contracted into this facility, and there were other facilities that were contracted by the same agency. And this gentleman just wouldn't leave my job alone. I mean, he was taking over things that I was responsible for. And so some days I would get to work at my assigned location and find that he'd called the therapists before I ever got to work and relocated them to another location. And so I would be there without my staff. I didn't have the staff I needed in order to carry out my job, which is, really difficult. And I ended up being on the floor myself a lot instead of doing my management position. So he really just undermined my role as a manager. And I ultimately, that's why I decided to leave that job, is I didn't feel comfortable that I was able to do my job to the best of my ability.
Yeah, I love that at least your first one took you under her wing a little bit. That's nice. I think that like us going into our level 2 fieldworks, we hope that we have like a CI like that who's willing to just, let me hold your hand and walk alongside you and help teach you, like still, we're in that learning phase. What advice would you give to students or practitioners who want to incorporate more leadership or like a healthy amount of leadership into their own journey?
I would say step up, take those leadership opportunities as they present themselves. I know that many times leaders are, they're found and they're promoted, but you have to be assertive also about letting people know that you are interested in taking a leadership role so that when the opportunity comes up, they think about you. Mm-hmm. I think that as a clinical or a fieldwork 2 student, you probably are going to be working more on your skill set and your confidence and all of that. But it's in your first job that you really need to start thinking about where would I like to go in my career? What's my next goal? I have this job. Do I want to continue to work as a clinician for my entire career? Do I want to take some leadership roles? And I would really encourage you guys to take leadership roles, to step up and become a leader. And there's no telling where you will end up. I can tell you for sure, when I graduated from my OT program, I had no idea that I would ever be a program director or a teacher. But it's a path, a journey.
I think that's beautiful. Macy and I kind of talk about how we always feel like we're not the leaders. We're really great second in commands. But I really want to get into that leadership roles, or I have big ideas, but sometimes I don't know how to go about it. So I think that's such wonderful advice for us to begin that process. And then we kind of wanted to talk about just like preparing for retirement, and if you had any just parting words or final bits of advice for us as we go on to our field work or just to future OT students.
Yeah, it's getting very real, this retirement thing. I think I'm here 2 days this week, and then we're off for 2 weeks, and then I come back for just a few days in January. So I'm not sure what I'm going to be doing, but I know what you're going to be doing, and that and so my words of advice would be, at every stage of your education and your career, say yes to every opportunity that comes along. You will never regret, taking on additional responsibilities. It will build your character and your confidence. I would say that to potential students who might be listening to us tonight, is to say, take every opportunity that comes along. If a leadership position comes available, or they're doing elections for one of the boards of directors, step up and take that chance. And you might be surprised that other people actually find leadership skills that you didn't know you have. So I think it's just important to say yes. And I know a lot of people talk about how I need to learn to say no more, but particularly earlier in your career, just say yes to these opportunities as they come up.
Yes. I love that. And I think it's so true. We're just in school and we're just learning and we're new grads. And I'm sure it can be so intimidating once we first start, working in a new place. But I feel like eventually once you're comfortable enough, you'll be able to say yes to even more bigger things the further you get into your career. Is there anything else that you would like to share with students or talk about today? Or
I think the other thing that's important is to be sure that you continue to grow as a therapist, and that you pursue lifelong learning, that you pursue certifications. Again, those are opportunities that will come your way, to be able to become certified in whatever it is that you choose, whatever area that you choose to develop your skills and to make your career. And I would also suggest that you stay in your job for a reasonable period of time. There have been times when I've talked to practitioners similar to myself who are out in practice, and they tell me that there's too much jumping around out there, that the new practitioners are always moving for the money. And when they find an opportunity that might pay a little bit more, they take that opportunity to leave. And you need to stay in a job until you feel like you're totally competent in that role. And maybe at that point in time, maybe you'll decide to move on and get a different type of job, or an advanced type of job. But that's also how you lose opportunities to become a leader, is to jump around too much. They want to see that you're loyal, and that you love your job, and that you want to continue to stay with an organization and develop your skills and contribute to the success of that organization. So that would be another, I think, thing that I would advise students is don't jump around too much. Really take advantage of all of the learning opportunities at your job before you think about moving on.
I think that is really well said. And I love how you're talking about how there wouldn't really be any opportunities for growth if you're not staying at a place for a long time because you haven't proven yourself. Mm-hmm. Or you also wouldn't be able to see what areas need leadership roles at the office when you haven't been there the whole time. So I think that is really valuable advice. And we did talk about that a little bit today in one of our prep sessions. And that was something an alumni said, that they think we should stay in there for at least 2 years. Mm-hmm. And all of them agreed with that. So I think That is very truthful.
Especially because I feel like you won't know until you're there what leadership or service opportunities that career or that specific site might offer you. So then your job can probably even grow from there. And kind of like your journey, we can see, you just kind of got to expect the unexpected. You never know where you're going to end up and what different opportunities might lead to something bigger. So,
right. It's important to have goals, but it's also important to follow the journey or the path that opens up to you. It might not be what you expect. And in some cases, it might not be what you want. That's the other thing I think that I learned in my career was that occupational therapy is not a guaranteed job. When I was first here in Arizona, we experienced actually the Congress passed a law that cut Medicare coverage for seniors for occupational, physical, and speech and language pathology. And suddenly there were no jobs, no opportunities for occupational therapists at all. People were losing their jobs. And so I had to really look at what my skill set was and what I could do that used my skill set, but was not an occupational therapy position. And we never know when that's going to happen. But I ended up doing a job that was, again, a really fun position that did utilize my skills as an occupational therapist. And that my job title there was residential manager. And it was for an agency that placed head injury clients post-acute care into community living situations. And so as the manager of that program, I was securing apartments, placing the residents in the apartments. I had to train the what we call life skill tutors, who were the people that lived with them 24 hours a day. So I was teaching transfer skills. I was teaching about adaptive equipment. I was teaching about, teaching about environmental modification. All of these skills that you learned as an occupational therapist. I even had to create an orthosis for a client in order to be able to speak on the phone. And so it was, and cooking in the kitchen with the clients and working with their life skill tutors to show how they could support the independence of these disabled individuals. So it wasn't an occupational therapy job at all, but it was something that I had to get really creative and find a position that was using my skills, and yet it wasn't truly an occupational therapy job.
Wow. And when was this? When did you say this was?
This was in it was here in Phoenix. So it would have been probably in the early 90s.
Oh,
wow.
So it was right around 1990 that this Balanced Budget Act was passed. And so the subsequent 4 years, it was like there were people losing their jobs because there was no reimbursement. And of course, that doesn't affect people that work in the school systems, but everybody that was fired from working with seniors were then taking up all the other positions that were available. So there were a lot of OTs that were unemployed at that point in time.
So did Medicare reverse that because we're seeing a lot of job growth now, or did they change something about it?
Yes, and again, that was something that the OT leaders did. They got together with Medicare and they demonstrated the value of occupational therapy, and they've now created a process where that limit has stages. And so you reach the first limit, and then if you can demonstrate that your client continues to need more therapy, you can go to the next limit, and so on and so on. So it's up to the therapist to be able to demonstrate that there is truly still a need for OT. But again, speaking to leadership, working with government agencies, working with Congress to make sure that they understand how important occupational therapy is to our citizens and to our society.
I'm really passionate about that. So that's definitely something I would love to look into and learn about that more.
Yeah.
I think we have a couple
yeah.
questions from our audience, Dr. Merchant.
Excellent.
I'm going to read some. Okay. Someone said that they're completing OTCAS applications, but they're still working on building my experiences in leadership and volunteering. Do you have any recommendations on how I can build that in a way that would make my application stand out?
That's a good question.
Well, I think that, we see a lot of applicants that have volunteered and observed occupational therapy. But what stands out is the leadership and the fact that you have put yourself out there to do service and to take a leadership role. So, for example, maybe working with Special Olympics and becoming an organizer, a student organizer, or working, as a whatever it is that you might be doing as your employment, to try to step up and take as much leadership and demonstrate as much leadership as you can, because the volunteering and the observation is primarily for you to learn about occupational therapy, but we are looking for students that have leadership ability. So definitely highlight the experiences that you have done in service leadership.
Thank you.
Looks like we have another question, and it says, what would you say are the program's strengths in preparing students for practice in areas like pediatrics, mental health, etc.?
We have a faculty that's extremely well-rounded in terms of all of the different areas of general care. And, as an accredited program, we're required to train you as a generalist. And so that means that you have equal emphasis in pediatrics, equal emphasis in seniors, equal emphasis in like neuro rehab, and equal emphasis in mental health. And one of our faculty members, Dr. Seelam, and I were talking about the fact that there are two really important core skills or core knowledge that occupational therapists need to have to work with every population. And one of those areas of knowledge is what we call in our program the intentional relationship, and being able to use your own personality and your own interactive modes to be able to be the therapist that your client needs you to be at any given moment. But the other thing that we think is a core skill for working with any population is the background in mental health, because you never know who you're going to be treating. Even in an upper extremity or hand therapy clinic, you may be working with someone that has bipolar disorder, or they may have an injury because of a suicide attempt, because of depression or another aspect of mental health background. So those are two areas that we really think are important core areas. And of course, we send a lot of students to a lot of different fieldwork sites, and they're always successful. So just the idea that our curriculum is very, very well balanced, I think is demonstrated by the outcomes that our students achieve in fieldwork.
Thank you for sharing that. Our last one is actually for Macy and I, and it said, what have you found most valuable during your time in the program that solidified your decision to attend Midwestern?
Chris, you want me to share?
Yeah, you can share all Midwestern.
So I think I was kind of listening to Dr. Merchant talk, and I was thinking about this question too. Because I think, like she said, like the staff is so well-rounded. And so I feel ready for my level fieldwork too, only because the staff has like provided us with so much support, and like they've got us to a point where we're like generalists in OT, I would say. So like, because we have so many different staff members with specific specialties, I guess you I guess you could say, like, we have Dr. Selim, who does an amazing job in peds, and just very specific stuff like that. I feel like because we have that general knowledge in most of the settings, we can take that and then in like our field work, apply it and learn even more about that specific setting. And so I think that has like really made me feel more confident and comfortable in going into level 2 field work too. And all the staff is just so amazing. Like the faculty has the open door policy. So I've always felt so comfortable going and talking to any of my professors, whether it's about school or field work or just random stuff going on, and just kind of being honest with them. And they always give the best advice, and they're really always on our team. Like they're always here for us. And I feel supported and heard all the time.
I think what you said is absolutely amazing. And as occupational therapy students, we know that there's more to life and living than just education, and our teachers really abide by that. Is that we are more than just students, and that they support us in every aspect of our life. And when I was looking at schools, of course, I look at the passing rate, which Midwestern has a very high passing rate. You should look it up. It's great. But also, I think we have something special that a lot of schools don't have, and that is our anatomy labs. A lot of them are virtual, but we are really fortunate and lucky enough that we have donors, and we get to be really hands-on with our learning experience. And that gave us opportunities to be like fellowships and anatomy and neuro TAs, and where we can just really solidify our learning. That helps us for level 2 field work, as well as just taking the NBCOT exam. I just think this school has so much to offer. And like Macy said, because it's a like generalist studies, we learn so much about all of the different areas of occupational therapy that I feel really prepared to go into my field work. So just wonderful.
Oh, one more. What is campus life like? I'm debating between online, hybrid, full-time on campus. Ooh, I'm thinking like campus life.
You know,
I
if
totally being online versus in person.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Did you have something you wanted to say, Dr. Merchant?
I was just going to say, I think the nature of the occupational therapy personality makes us want to be together face to face.
Yep.
And I think that is so enriching. I can't even imagine having taught during the pandemic and made that switch to teaching online. I would have just a really hard time doing that full time. I love to see the students' faces. I love to see them excited and talking in class. So that's just my input on that.
Yeah, I think I couldn't even imagine now doing it online. I think that being on campus has been amazing. I've literally met some of my best friends here, and it's so cool because you create such a community, like within your cohort. You see each other every day and you grow those amazing relationships, and you feel comfortable like bouncing ideas off of each other and accepting being wrong sometimes, and then hearing what other people have to say about different ideas or treatment plans or whatever it may be that we're learning. And it just, I think, kind of really enriches your learning all around being in person, I would say.
I would agree. I was contemplating between Midwestern and Baylor, and they're a hybrid program, and I visited that school, but I just know my learning style is I like to be in the classroom, because if I'm having an online class, chances are that I'm probably not going to be paying attention.
Yeah.
But if you know that you're great at that, then that works for you. But I like being in person. I like building those connections with teachers. I feel that when I have those connections, I'm not afraid to ask for help when I need it. And I don't know, I just learn better that way. And then a lot of the times we practice our skills right after we're taught it. So that knowledge really sticks with us. And then in like hybrid programs, you learn for like, I don't know other schools, but a lot of times you learn for a couple weeks and then you meet as a cohort and for a lab, and then you practice stuff you learned maybe a couple weeks ago. Whereas when you're in person, you learn it and then you can apply it that same week. So it really sticks with you. So that helped my learning a lot more.
And I think also just like being physically on the Midwestern campus, like we have a beautiful campus and we have amazing resources. Like just, I can't tell you how many times I've gone to the library and just studied, and even just being at a grad school with other medical professions makes you feel it's just a different community than being online and being in just a screen and, you know, like Jen said, only meeting a couple times a month or whatever, just because OT is such a hands-on career in some settings. And so being able to practice those transfers or the hand therapy stuff, you know?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Another one.
This question says, I'm currently in a respiratory, is that
An
RBT? Is that a behavioral therapist?
Yeah.
With experience in autism for 6 years. I want to get into occupational therapy with an emphasis in autism. What could I do to stand out when enrolling? Dr. Merchant, do you have any advice, or do you
Well,
want to?
just the fact that you have 6 years as a behavioral therapist is going to make you stand out.
Yeah.
You know, we have a lot of applicants who come right out of undergrad, and they don't have any work experience, and they don't really have a passion. And so I think just the fact that you have had some work experience in that area, you're obviously passionate about it. And so I think that, you know, one of the other things that that we do at Midwestern that not everybody, not all programs do, and that is do in-person interviews. We do some virtual interviews as well. And, you know, it's really not a big deal one way or the other, but we pay close attention to what you've done in your past. We have your application there. We're looking at your work experience. And, you know, that's going to set you apart right there. Just make sure that you include that in your application. And, you know, you also have to write a personal statement. And so you might write some things some experiences that you had as a behavioral technician that will make you stand out. I just interviewed somebody recently that talked about a kiddo that had really serious behavioral issues. And she was the only one of her team that could handle that kiddo. And basically she learned how to do it. And so some of your experiences would be good to highlight.
All right. Okay. I don't think we have any other questions. Thank you so much, Dr. Merchant, for joining us today and sharing your wealth of knowledge and all of your experience in leadership and service that you've had over the years. I think that so many of us can benefit from hearing all your stories. And so just thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
You're wonderful.
You guys are too.
Thank you.
Dr. Merchant. We'll see you tomorrow.
Yeah.
Okay. See you tomorrow.
Bye.
Bye-bye.